Hello, and thanks for joining us for this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. I'm Paul, and I'm joined by Ian and Ken, and together we are your marketing guides. So today we're going to talk about what we as marketers see some trends in 2023. I mean, costs have increased and conversion rates have decreased. Of course, that varies by industry. And there's also some interesting trends when it comes to demographics. So let's get started. I mean, this isn't exhaustive. So if you have any thoughts or trends you want to share or have us talk about, just let us know. So, Ken, let's start talking about the advertising duopoly. What is this? Is their dominance fading, and what is taking market share from them?
Well, I think you just answered your question when you asked the second part, which is what's taking market share away from them. Um, so the duopoly is no, it's Meta, Facebook, and Google. So Meta and Google, they have dominated the digital ad spend in the U.S. anyway for almost a decade, really since 2014. They are down from their peak of almost 55% in 2017 to where now they're down considerably to where they no longer own 50% total of the overall online ad spend. And so you see some up and comers that are starting to eat into a little bit of it in terms of search and Google's dominance in the search realm, and those competitors are Amazon and TikTok. They are both growing their advertising revenues, and people are leveraging both those platforms, for product searches and for ideas online as well. Then you've got streaming platforms like Hulu and Roku, you know, networks like Paramount's, online platforms or Fox's or Peacock or whatever that are all collectively pulling away from the traditional TV advertising dollars, and those are all considered to be online digital ads. Plus, you've got Spotify and Pandora, on the audio side of things. So that's become, a real hit to the duopoly. It's starting to take market share away. Then you've got things, like Apple's app tracking policies. Seriously, I mean, they did a number on Meta's advertising revenue, and I mean, I think I've seen estimates around 10 billion just from the last year. That's a massive impact, and um, so when you've got Amazon and TikTok pulling away from the traditional Google search strength, and you've got Apple eating into Meta's capabilities because of Meta does not have the all of the advertising targeting criteria that they used to have now, and so that's become a really um, strong force in limiting the duopoly. They still almost have half of the percent or half of the overall online revenue. So don't get me wrong, they're still major players. But what we're seeing too is that because of a force like TikTok, whether or not TikTok's going to be around in the U.S. Within the next month or a couple of months is anybody's guess. But one thing is sure, um, short form video has a massive impact. And so you're seeing Google with YouTube and Meta with Instagram starting to leverage the power of digital video and digital video ads just to be able to stay competitive. So that's kind of what's going on.
All right, good info. So, Ian, Google Ads has historically had a good return on investment, but we see these averages, and I think we need to be careful with that. I think that's dangerous because some industries have a really good return on investment, and others Google Ads just doesn't work for them. So, can you talk about that a little bit and some of the trends we're seeing in costs and conversions?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Google, just to be super clear, Google Ads is still one of the best places to advertise. And let me just clearly define, there's two main types of advertising. There's kind of digital billboard advertising, which is what Facebook is, which is what TikTok is, which is what Instagram is, right? Google also does display advertising. So it's that type of interruptive type advertising where it's more of a shotgun approach. You can still do targeting to some degree. But when we talk about search advertising, the main players in search advertising are Google, Microsoft Bing, and YouTube. Like those are the biggest players right now. And Google by far is way far ahead of the other guys, right?
And I know
And
YouTube.
and I mentioned YouTube, right? And the important thing to remember about that is the difference in behavior. The ads are shown to people that are searching for what you deem as a criteria that makes them a qualified buyer. So super different platforms, super different strategies. So Google Ads still continues to be super powerful. So I don't want that to get lost, because when we start to look at industry averages, even when we start to look at specific industries, which I'll share a little bit about, some kind of highlights, I think it's really important to remember that yes, especially when you look at year over year numbers, 2021 and 2022 were radically different beasts when it comes to what was happening, and we'll as a group, we're going to be looking at this in a little bit. So let me share a little bit about some trends with Google Ads specifically. So cost per lead has increased radically. We saw on average, this is across all industries, a 19, so almost a 20% increase across all industries. But it's important to understand that some industries were highly impacted and some weren't. And in fact, some benefited. So just to give you kind of a highlight of a few, some industries saw increases, so cost per lead increase. And just to define a cost per lead, this is when somebody clicks on they see your ad, they click on your ad, they convert, which means they did some form of highly valued conversion, like a goal that you place. That's usually a form completion, and it's usually or a phone call, form completion, maybe a download, depending on the cycle, the sales cycle of that industry. So some saw increases as high as 130% in the cost to capture one of those leads. Others saw much less. So let me give you a smattering here. So auto repair saw an increase of cost per lead of 20%. So that's pretty significant. But then home improvement was 54%. Dentist was 57%. Business services is what we would be classified as marketing agencies, saw 87% increase in cost per lead. And attorneys and lawyers saw a whopping 112% increase in cost per lead. Another statistic or another metric that's really important when you're looking at Google Ads is conversion rates. And just to, I'll kind of give a high level that you always want your cost per lead to go down. You always want your conversion rates to go up. You want your cost per click to go down, and you want your click-through rates to go up. So these four key metrics we saw radical fluctuations with over the past year. So conversion rates have decreased, and that's not good. Over 90% of all industries saw a decrease in the conversion rate, with an average decline of 14%. So again, averages are misleading. So let me share some specific industries. So physicians were at almost a 14% decrease. Auto repair was at 13.7, so almost at 14% as well. Dentists, almost at 12%. Home improvement, just over, almost at 11. But each of these had significant drops since last year, ranging from 24% to 10%, like depending on the industry. So again, 2021 was a bubble year because so much was going on. But it's important to understand that costs per conversion rates went down. When you're looking at cost per click, they went up, but not significantly. So overall they went up 2%. But again, when you start to drill into specific industries, like arts and entertainment saw a 44% increase in cost per click. Physicians saw a 15% increase. Home improvement, 4%, so it was almost stagnant. Dentists was almost the same. Auto repair saw a decrease, so that's good. The cost per click went down for auto repair of 3%. And attorneys saw a decrease of 7%. And then the final metric I think that's really important when we're looking at trends is the click-through rate. And click-through rates were pretty stable across the board. But again, when you start to look at different industries, so home improvement, click-through rates went down. Again, we want click-through rates to go up as advertisers. Physicians saw a decrease of 4%. Auto repair actually went up 7%. Dentists went up 5%. Attorneys went up 32%. So it really depends on the industry you're in. Don't take industry averages as significant to your industry until you drill down. So it's really important to gather the information that's most important for your industry. But those are the biggest trends that we've seen in Google Ads over the last 12 months.
Yeah, and something interesting in all those statistics is click-through rates were stable, yet cost per lead and cost per conversion went up. So what does that tell you about what the consumer is doing, But Ken, following up on what he just talked about, how can businesses adapt to this? What can they do, if anything?
Yeah, well, so I mean, a couple of things really jump out. One is inflation, and it's definitely having an impact. It's bringing conversion rates down. People may still have the appetite to want to click through an ad, but they may not complete the action that you want them to take. Like Ian said, of filling out a form or making that phone call. Maybe they're taking longer to make a decision because money's a little tighter. I mean, there are a lot of different things that are happening there. Even supply chain issues, can factor into this kind of stuff. So really, I think, in a time of economic change, especially when things are starting to get a little tighter, it's always a great idea for a business to look at their costs, look at their profit margins. You may have to pick winners and losers in terms of what you want to spend money advertising on and marketing. You need to look at ways where you can either cut costs or raise prices, depending on which is more appropriate. And I think the important takeaway is don't just assume that year over year your costs are going to stay stable. I mean, as we all see the economic turbulence that is happening, we've all seen some businesses do a heck of a lot better, and we've seen a lot of businesses do a heck of a lot worse over the last couple of years. So you can't just set a budget from one year to the next and expect to get the same results. Having said that, there's a wonderful change happening in the world of digital marketing technology, leveraging automation and leveraging funnels. So while you're looking at and evaluating your profitability and your actual costs, to deliver products and services, you should also you should always look to see, what is my best performing, what is my highest profit, type of a product. Yeah, or is it a product that when somebody buys it, they're going to wind up becoming a great lifetime value client because it's going to lead to massive recurring purchases or upsell opportunities. You want to examine all of that, but then you've got to automate the whole process. That's going to be your biggest way to cut costs and improve performance. And we've talked about in this show in the past, there are ways that you can automate without losing a lot of the personal touch. You don't ever want to lose that personal touch. And, customer experience, I think, has been suffering over the last year overall across all industries for a whole lot of reasons. And businesses that can retain that quality of customer service and customer support, I think are well positioned to continue to do better. Google has changed what they're doing with broad match. So now, if you just let Google determine how to build your ad campaign, broad match is broader than ever. They took away some of the controls that limited what, and basically what that means is it dramatically increases the display of your ad to people who probably have lesser intent to buy. And I know Paul and I are big fans, and Ian, I think you probably are too. We like to focus our Google ad spend dollars on intention oriented to the extent that we can. Now, if that doesn't mean you always do that. In some cases, you need to spend some money to prime the pump, to build an understanding of what your product or service can do, especially if it's new or different in the market, and there's education and things like that involved. But in general, you're going to get the best performance from your Google ads when you can focus on intention-oriented keywords, because those are the ones that are going to convert. And for all of the reasons and all the statistics that Ian talked about, that's why you want to do that. So you really need to be working. I mean, if you don't have an understanding of how Google Ads works, you need to hire an expert. Because if you just let Google do it, you're going to waste a ton of money. It's good for Google, and at least in the short term. It's not necessarily good for your business. So it's really important to do that. You want to keep your ads showing for the right searches. You like, as an example, painting. Painting is an incredibly broad phrase. When somebody does a search for painting, they could be looking for a painting that they can hang in their office. They could be looking for art supplies related to painting. They could be looking for a house painter or a commercial painter. That's too broad. And so you don't want to just it's a simple example, but you really need to refine these things and dial them in. There are ways that you can kind of address this as well, where you want to look at, as we've talked about, the marketing hourglass. Know, like, and trust at the top of the hourglass. Maybe there are more cost-effective ways to use advertising than a search ad. Maybe doing display ads, maybe YouTube ads, maybe social ads. So I think now more than ever, you really need to look at building a mix, an omni-channel approach to your ad strategy. Just relying on one form of ad at the same price of what you've been paying is probably not going to cut it. So I think you really need to think about how that's going to impact. The other thing I would say is, all these different ad platforms, as Ian talked about, the display ads, they're disruptive, but you do have some effective targeting criteria. They're pay per impression model, as opposed to a pay per click. So you get 1,000 impressions for a particular price. When you do that, you've got to know that that's just it's playing the role of the know, like, and especially the know and the like, to let people know that you exist, and get them into consideration. Then you want to probably target your ads focused on intent when they're getting close to that buying phase, right? So the try and the buy, you need to be switched over to intention oriented, which is where I think search, Google search, well-designed Google search ad campaigns are phenomenal. So yeah, I think the overall big takeaway for me is if you're trying to maintain the level of business that you've had with advertising, you need to be thinking about having to spend more this year, because it's going to be a more complex mix, and costs have gone up and conversions have gone down. So if you're trying to get the same volume of leads and customers, you're going to have to spend more money, because the conversion rates have taken a hit as well.
And a couple of things you mentioned, like on the automations, you can automate a lot of things, but at some point you need to, pick up the phone and talk to people.
Yeah.
And on the Google ads with the broad match, something, within the Google ads platform, there's certain things you can have the system automate to make your life easier. And some of it's good, some of it not so good. But one of the things Google did, they made a change to something called removing redundant keywords. If you have a phrase match and a broad match that are the same, and you have that remove redundant keywords automatically applied, it's going to remove the phrase match and force you, because Google is trying to force everyone into broad match keywords because they claim their algorithm is sophisticated enough to show your ads to the proper people. I'm not sure if anyone believes that. I don't think Google actually believes it. But
I've done some A/B testing with that for clients, and it has not proven true at all. And we've stopped those broad match automated campaigns. Like, we tested it, right? Google had some really compelling reasons to try it, really compelling sales pitches. So we put some ad spend towards it, and initially they had some good performance, but then this is something I was going to share coming up, but I think it's really relevant here, is that some metrics can be super deceiving, right? So if you're fixated on click-through rates, that type of strategy that Google's automating, it will increase your click-through rates. But just as you said, Ken, they're probably the wrong clicks, right? You're not attracting the right people. So, we'll get more into this, but yeah.
Yeah, I've actually done some A/B testing on that for a couple clients as well, and I kind of came to the same conclusion you did. It does not work as Google claims it does.
Yeah.
But then I think you've kind of answered this a little bit. I didn't know if you want to go give us some more context or a deeper dive, but we use these terms like CPC and conversion rate and cost per lead, but if you don't take those things in context, it can give you some very misleading data. Like the average cost per click is $3. Well, not for a defense attorney, it's not. So, can you maybe add some more context to that?
Yeah. So I kind of answered this before, just like you said, but I think what I'll do is I'll take it a step further, and I'll speak specifically to your own industry. So, and even in your own campaigns. And what I mean by that is, so we talked a little bit about, here's the industry averages, and this is across every single industry. So this is platform averages, basically. Then we had industry averages, right? Which I shared a little bit, some highlights about. But I even think those can be super deceiving because within your industry, you have ideal projects that you work on, and you have non-ideal projects that you work on as a business, most likely. So as an example, we have an electrical contractor client. An ideal project would be a full panel rebuild for them, or the installation of an electric vehicle charger, or an addition is being put on, or a new home is being built, and wiring that whole home is an ideal project. Do they still do, hey, I need pot lights in my entertainment room? For sure they can do that. But is it lucrative to the same degree? Absolutely not. Should you be paying the same amount for those leads as you are for a whole home wiring? Absolutely not. And so that's where I think even the industry averages can be misleading, because you might be competing with a competitor who, first of all, isn't very sophisticated in how they're doing their advertising, or they're trying to attract, like there's electricians out there that only do pot lights, right? So they're paying higher than they probably should for the pot light projects, and you're paying, for something that you really don't want. So again, it all comes down to targeting and knowing your own metrics. So I think that's where it's really important. And having, we've talked a little bit about this, but because Google's making it so apparently easy to be good at this now with their automated campaigns. And I say apparently because I think we've covered that it's not, on the surface, it looks like, oh, I can just tell Google, I want more conversions, I'm willing to pay this amount. Google will automatically, like you can actually have it where Google will automatically find search words that appear relevant and they'll add them to your campaign. Like it can be that automated, which is super, super scary, because once you see these things rolling for a while, you see how far off track they can go, right? There's keywords in there that are horrible. Anybody who's managed ad campaigns know that some of the real gold is in the negative keywords, which you set up in order to not attract certain searches that people are doing. So I think that's really important, that you really understand your business, the buying cycle of your own customers, because that can radically be different across the board. Ken, you talked about the marketing hourglass, right? And even that can be radically different in, the cost per click for somebody at the top of the funnel where they're just investigating can be radically different than the searches and the competitiveness of when they're ready to buy. But all of those acronyms that you said, Paul, and that I think we've covered kind of, I think they're really important if you're managing the ad account. But for the average business owner, like nobody cares, all you care about as the business owner, truly, because, each of us works with business owners and we hear them, and all they care about is, if I put X number of dollars towards Google Ads, how many actual closed, good qualified leads do I get out of that? And is it growing better than last year, or is it decreasing? And are those leads costing me more or less? And I think all the data is telling us that it's costing more now for all the various factors. But I think that's really, if as a business owner, those are the things that you care most about. One thing I would also say is that you need to be aware of the changes that are affecting Google Ads, both internally, which you talked about with the automated changes. And you also need to be aware of the external factors. And Ken, I think you did a really good job covering this, where, COVID, man, like if any of you, and I know the three of us have, but if anybody who's listening did Google advertising or any kind of advertising from, say, 2019 to today, you've ridden a crazy roller coaster ride, because industries entirely stopped. Industries who hadn't invested heavily in digital marketing suddenly were like, crap, I have to get my act together. I have to pull up my socks and start advertising digitally, which of course creates more competition. Google Ads, in fact, any online ad platform that I can think of, is auction based. So, which means you, me as an advertiser, if we're all trying to get the same eyeballs and we're all using similar key phrases and targeting, that will increase in cost. The more advertisers, the more ad spend available, the higher the cost, right? So I think that's really important to understand. And also that we went through a bubble, that in, like, for home improvement, 2021 was this crazy wild ride in that people couldn't travel. They were suddenly putting their money towards home improvement projects because they had the money and they couldn't use it elsewhere. And they were sitting at home and in their backyards, and they were like, I'd really like my home, my windows to be better. You're sitting in your backyard all summer and you're like, my shingles need some work, or, whatever. And we definitely saw an increase in that. But what that means is year over year results made 2022 look soft, because 2021 was this crazy, bubble. And I think that's really important as we move into 2023. Ken talked about inflation. There are always external factors that we need to take into account when we're, looking at advertising. Because, as an example, we have a windows and doors company. That was a highly competitive marketplace before COVID hit. It went crazy during COVID because of the reasons I just shared. But then after COVID, now there's inflation. People are not spending as much on home improvement projects. And these, like all of the companies out there, are now spending more on advertising, which means the cost per lead costs more, and so on. So I think these are really important factors for any business owner to understand. But again, it sounds terribly self-serving when we as marketing agency owners talk about how you really need a partner to navigate these waters. But truthfully, think about the people within your business. You may have some really smart young people that are tech savvy. They may be social media savvy, but unless they've actually done this kind of work year over year and understand how to navigate, how to get the most out of every dollar spent, you will be losing and wasting money on these platforms, because you'll be at a disadvantage to the companies that are partnering with people that know what they're doing. So that's just kind of a last thing last piece of advice I'd want to share with you.
Well, and following up on that, I mean, it's like, for me to go buy shingles for my roof, I am not going to have the level of expertise that a roofer is going to have. And they're going to know you need to get this brand of shingle. It needs to be 30-year or 50-year or whatever it is. And here's why. And they've got the experiential reality backing up that knowledge. They stay on top of the industry. They live and breathe it, and they see it every day, and they see what fails and they see what protects. Yeah. That's what you get when you hire a true marketing company as a partner. So it shouldn't be a foreign concept to anybody.
Yeah.
So Ian, are pot bites what you use to grow marijuana?
Oh, sorry. I don't know if that's a regional term, but those are the inset lights put in a ceiling. At least that's what we call them. Recessed lighting.
There you go.
So let's pivot a little here.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
I assume if you use the right kind of bulbs, you could use those for the circumstance you were.
Which is a growing industry.
It's hugely growing industry.
Literally and figuratively.
Exactly.
So Ken, let's Angie, formerly Angie's List, released a report and talked about, they kind of focused on home services and home service spending. Saw a huge increase in 2021. Ian talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And it looks like it kind of returned to more of a normal ad spend in 2022, but home improvement spending was still pretty strong. So what can some of the service companies and marketers take away from that and be aware of?
Yeah, well, I think we've talked about the fact that you should plan on it being more competitive and more expensive than it has been. Costs are just going up for a whole variety of reasons. But I also think, there's kind of this convergence of several different factors that businesses really need to set their expectations accordingly. In 2023, because of inflation, we're likely to see a dip in demand. Plus, just the sheer volume of projects that were done over the last couple of years means that people don't need to have as much done as that maybe they were originally. They just recently got their house painted, or they did this or they did that. The shift, I think, is going to be, and I don't think it's going to be dramatic, but I think it is going to impact certain businesses. If you do more maintenance related work, that's still going to be in demand. People are that if they have to pick and choose, do I do a new project to get this? Is it a need to have, or is it a have to have? And if it's a have to have, like if you've got to have your HVAC replaced, versus, doing a kitchen or bath remodel, there's an existential need there that people are going to have to make a decision on, because, in many households, money's tighter. So that's going to be an impact. I think there's going to be a little bit of a shift toward people wanting to spend more on maintenance and keeping the house running than maybe on investing it to improve, some of the features of the house. Having said that, there are still things that are going to do pretty well in terms of home improvements. Interior painting looks like it's still going to continue to be really strong. Bathroom and remodeling is always going to, it's just, it's something that weighs on people's mind, and it's something they deal with several times a day. So there's high motivation for people to take on that type of a project. Outdoor renovations, I think, is going to continue to be really hot because people are looking to get more out of their house in cost-effective ways, and you can do some really great things in terms of outdoor renovations, that don't cost nearly as much as maybe some of the interior things that, especially if you have to remove walls and stuff like that, that can be incredibly expensive. Replacing floors, those are lower cost but high perceived value things that I think people are going to be looking at. When you look at, the pressures of inflation, the fact that there's probably less backlog of projects that people have on their minds because they already got a lot of them taken care of. And now, because of COVID, people have become a lot more aware and have started investing more in marketing in general, and digital marketing and digital advertising in particular, that those costs are all going up. So I think most businesses really need to think about, if they want to try to keep pace with the growth that they've had, first of all, that may not be realistic. So you need to set your expectations accordingly based on your industry, just because, like we said, if you're in an industry where a lot of backlog of work was taken care of, and, or needed work was taken care of, to where that the need has come down and the demand has come down. But I think it's, you're going to have to focus and be more strategic than ever. And I think you probably need to plan on spending more than you have in the last couple of years. It was pretty easy for a lot of businesses to do pretty well, if they just made some investment to get ahead of, some of their local competitors. That was probably good enough. In 2023, I don't think you should assume that.
Yeah, those load-bearing walls are highly overrated. You just take them out.
Yeah.
Do it yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ian kind of mentioned that. Ken, you just mentioned it as well, that a lot of smaller businesses, they just had to do the bare minimum to stay ahead of their competitors. But now their competitors are starting to realize that they have to do something as well, and that increases the competition for finite resources. So it's definitely going to be more competitive. Ian, something else that's really, this isn't something new, but I think people forget about it or don't take it into account, that different generations spend differently on things. So can you talk about those differences and how businesses can use that to target their messaging?
Yeah, I think the study, Paul actually shared a really great study with us, and the results of it. And one of it was, just from a high level, it's important to remember that different generations spend differently. It was focused on home improvement and the marketing and advertising and trends related to that. And one of the things that's obvious, but we overlook a lot, is that different generations buy differently. And it's because of their life stage, right? So if you think about your own life stage, let's look at Gen Z. So when we were the age of Gen Zers, we were just getting into the workplace. We were starting to develop a kind of a stable work environment and income level. We started to look at getting married, perhaps, maybe starting a family, but seriously considering, okay, what am I going to do with my future? And then the millennials now, so picturing ourselves as millennials, they have started families in large part. They have bought their first home. So these guys are actually spending a lot. They're the highest spender of home improvement this past year. And they're also they hold the highest number of home improvement projects at any one time. So it's interesting. It's not, again, like if you stop to think about where you were at that stage, you were probably doing the same thing, right? You were feathering your nest. You were trying to make your house a home for your growing family, perhaps, if that's what you were doing. Or if you didn't have a family, you were investing in your home to make it as great a place for yourself as possible. And then Gen Xers, which I would be in my age group, we are actually kind of caught between. We have hopefully stable jobs. We've had stable income for a long time. We've probably been in our home for a long time. So we've gone through those other stages where we've probably invested in the home already. And Gen Xers are actually the lowest spenders of home improvement in the past year. Although they still have a fairly high level number of projects, but they're spending less on them. So that's interesting. It's more, tweaking, I guess. Baby boomers are the third highest spenders in home improvement over the past year. And then the silent generation or seniors, right? The people that are, were in the shortly after World War II, that generation, they're actually the second highest spenders, but they have the lowest number of projects on the go. So it's fascinating to look at the stats, but they do make sense. It's kind of common sense when you think about your life stages and what you go through at those different life stages. So I think how that applies to businesses is that you need to be really clear on who you're trying to attract, understand what they're looking for, because each generation could potentially be looking for very different types of projects, and being willing to spend very different types of money for those projects as well. So, there's always a benefit in niching, or in the very least, niching or niching your message to a particular audience, because your audience wants to hear resonation between what you're saying. They want to feel like you understand them. And so I think that's where, as a business, as a marketer, you can really start to say, okay, I really want to attract these guys because they look like they'll be the right fit. They'll be lucrative for our business. They'll help us create a sustainable business. And we need to focus our attention and our messaging in a particular way to attract those people and make them happy.
Well, and that also ties into the ad platforms that you choose that you should be using.
That's right. Yeah. Right. Because Gen Zers would be far more on TikTok than the silent generation, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. And translation for US based audience, that's Gen Z.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
So you're saying that the seniors aren't going to be doing dancing videos on TikTok? Is that...
So a small percentage will, for sure. And, it's always it's funny that you say that, Paul, because, for years and years and years, people were saying, Facebook was for the younger generation. And then of course, as people grew older, they stayed on Facebook. But then we saw the younger generation get into it, even though it's not maybe their primary social channel. But then what we saw was the older generations getting onto Facebook because they wanted to be involved with their kids, their grandkids. And so what's interesting is, if the trend holds true and people feel a comfort level on other social channels, right? If you're a senior, and your grandkids are producing TikToks, like I would suggest that if the trend holds true, then seniors will be on TikTok. They may not be producing content, but they may be digesting specific content related to their family structure.
Assuming TikTok stays.
Assuming, yeah. Or whatever the next one is, right? I think it's the trend and the understanding of how we work as people that is probably the better lesson than being stuck on a specific platform. And that's where, Ken, you mentioned omnichannel. I think that's where that message of omnichannel is so important because, you want to be where the people are that you're trying to connect with, where your prospects and your existing customers and clients are and patients. And so you need to be aware of where they are and be there, right? Invest some time and energy or find partners that will help you be in those platforms. It's not terribly complex. It's hard to do. Right. And do it well, but it's not a terribly complex idea.
I mean, it's ultimately delivering the right message at the right time for the person who's in the right frame of mind to take, whatever action you want them to take.
Yeah, exactly.
So throw this out there. Any other comments or thoughts on what to be ready for in 2023 as far as marketing is concerned?
Well, I think, as Ian mentioned, Google search ads are going to continue to be a very strong play from a digital advertising perspective. So sure, even though some people have started to chip away a little bit, it is still clearly the leader. And so if you really should take a good hard look at doing Google ads. Now, one of the interesting things that I've seen over the last couple of days is that Microsoft is going to be incorporating Chat GPT into its search. And if you haven't heard of Chat GPT, it's all the rage right now in terms of AI, artificial intelligence. It's amazing technology, and it may be somewhat of a game changer to where it's going to help Microsoft get more of the search market. And if that happens, then there's another threat to Google. But whether that's going to happen over the course of a year, um, probably not dramatically, but it's something to keep your eyes on for sure.
One thing I would add about that is it's come out now from the founder of ChatGPT that and lots of anecdotal evidence to this fact. And I think this will become far more known as people get involved. Like, it's a fun tool right now, but it again, the owner has come out, the founder of it has come out and said the results are pretty bad, meaning that the information you're looking for is not always given correctly. And one of the examples in a recent article I was reading was, if you ask who the president of the United States is right now, it'll say Donald Trump. so it's just an example of where, is it cool? Absolutely. Is it a trend that is definitely going to become more relevant? Absolutely. Is that the platform that's going to own the marketplace or displace a Google? Not at this point, unless they do something radically different. Because again, the reason Google has become a dominant search player is because of relevance. Google is so good. Like, this is what they built their whole business on. And we're not just talking ads, we're talking organic, we're talking everything. Why people use Google, even maps, right? Is because when you search for something, you get a true relevant result of what you're looking for. And Google is very focused on intent, like understanding what's your intent when you use these words to search for something. Are you looking for a commercial intent, a purchase intent, like a informational intent? And that's where, as users and consumers, there is no other strong player yet. And I think that leads really well into kind of just a thought I wanted to share is, I agree 100%, Ken. Like, Google is not going away, at least not for this year. So nobody jump out. But for me, because you guys probably do the same, you manage clients' overall marketing strategy and the tactics and the different platforms in order to get them the best return on marketing investment as possible. What this whole upheaval in costing and results with Google Ads and other platforms means is it has only raised the importance of organic results. And I think if you have ignored SEO, search engine optimization, up till now, you are going to feel the pain, because there's no other way except to pay for ads at a higher cost. But if you're getting organic leads that are equal, if not even better sometimes, than paid leads, because statistics show that people would rather click on an organic lead or organic search result than a paid search result. You are just shooting yourself in the foot, and you're creating an unsustainable model, because advertising will continue to increase. Like, it would take radical, worldwide upheaval for people to stop, for your competition to stop spending money on ads. So therefore, it's just going to keep increasing. Will its value decrease? Not necessarily, but your
Right.
cost per lead could increase.
Well, a couple of things there. I mean, Google is definitely it's making its search results page much more like a news feed, consistent with a social media platform. So you can keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. In some cases, I've had that. In other cases, I don't. So I'm not quite sure how that's rolling out. But that gives Google more opportunity to run more ads, which means that you're going to have an increased competition. And it also gives you a better chance to show up organically, because people are going to keep, scrolling and consuming, and the behavior of people is that they're comfortable doing that. And so, if you're on the third page right now and you make an investment to get high on the second page, that's probably going to start to show a little bit of an impact. So investing in SEO is absolutely critical. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that really shakes out. To me, that's fascinating. They're also going to be delivering video ads from YouTube and also organic video results in that news feed in a greater capacity as well. And when you look at, for a local business, 10 to 20% of people click on Google Ads, and that's where your calls or your clicks are going to come from. 60 to 70% of people click on the Google Map results. Well, that's where you gotta be involved in organic SEO to be able to get on the Google Map results. And then the other 20% or so are going to click on the true organic search results down below the maps. And so if you're a type of business where, people are finding you by typing in your product or service plus a location, still the number one option is to show up on the Google Maps. If you can get in the top 3 where you're showing up on that map result, that is the best place to be.
And I thought Google got so dominant because they illegally crushed their competition. Speaking of which, did you see that article that the EU has determined that Facebook's ad practices are illegal?
Illegal? No, I haven't seen that.
It might have been Search Engine Journal. I'll have to find it, but yeah, the EU they determined that that Facebook's ad practices are illegal. I didn't read the article. I just saw the headline. It's like, well, that could be a problem for Facebook.
Well, so having said that, I would just caution our viewers and listeners, if somebody comes to you and they pitches that Facebook ads are the absolute best no-brainer platform for regardless of what your business is, you need to push back hard and you need to challenge that. In some cases, yeah, it's a great, incredible, fantastic platform and maybe the best. But in other cases, it's absolutely not. And if they come to you with a one-dimensional strategy, it's just Facebook ads, regardless of what your business does, you need to be really cautious of that.
Yeah, it goes back to the omni-channel that you were talking about. Yeah, I thought this was going to be a shorter episode, but guess not. But anyway, thanks to the audience for joining us today. Hope you found this topic informative, and if so, please share it with other businesses. And Ian, what do we do?
We should keep calm and mark it on, folks.